This is Ron Garney, and you're listening to the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.
Greetings, Cap fans. Welcome to episode 139 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and as always, I am joined by the best gosh darn co-host out there. That is Mr. Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob. Hello. Hola. Bonjour. Hello. Ciao. Konnichiwa. Privyet. Ni hao. Shalom. Namaste.
Is this was this a commercial for Rosetta Stone? The full subscription?
No, but no. And actually, it might actually be a flashback to, I think I did a whole bunch of different languages when I did a greeting. I'm just now remembering that I did that when we had Ralph Warner on the show on episode 69, all the way back then. And we did the international comics,
foreign language editions.
Yeah. I now that I think about it, I did do that, but I did it for a different reason today, Bob, because I just gave you 10 different hellos in different languages. Mm-hmm. If I had done another 50 different languages and I kept it all within a minute, I would have been in the Guinness Book World Records.
Wow.
But I didn't, Bob.
What a missed opportunity.
I know. So back in 2016, a fellow by the name of Ziad Yusuf Faza.
Oh, Ziad.
Yeah, from Lebanon. He said hello in 59 different languages in 1 minute, which put him into, he made a world record.
Wow.
But I didn't quite match that. But you may be asking, why am I doing my hellos in a world record trying fashion? Well, that's because today we're very excited to have on the podcast Mr. Scott Koblish. He is not only an artist extraordinaire who has been around for 30 years now and has done hundreds of stories, thousands of pages as either an inker or a penciler, but he has actually made it into the Guinness Book of World Records for one of his covers for he did for Deadpool. And he's got another cover that just came out for Fantastic Four 700. So we want to talk to him about that. And of course, he's done a lot of Captain America stuff too. And you know us, we're going to get to the bottom of all his Cap work.
Indeed. That's really interesting. I've always wanted to be in the Guinness Book of World Records. Maybe something to do with pie or something.
Yeah. What kind of pie, Bob?
I like a berry pie, Rick. And I'm not particular what kind of berry, blueberry, raspberry, boysenberry, I just like a good berry pie.
Strawberry?
I could go with a strawberry rhubarb pie.
Yeah.
I could do that. Yeah. I could do that.
How come they don't make strawberry pies?
Well, I don't know. I guess
strawberry is a popular fruit,
it is,
right?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question, Rick. It's really,
These are the kind of hard-hitting questions, Bob, that you can expect on the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.
Right. Indeed. If you want to ask that question, I recommend that you go to a Marie Callender's restaurant or, Caro's or someplace like that. That are really, are pie experts.
Okay. I'll pretend I understood that. Speaking of asking questions, Bob, one of the perks of being a patron of the show is that our patrons get to not only know who our guests are going to be way in advance of everybody else, but they get to submit a question to our guests. And so as everyone who listens to the show regularly knows, we have a new guest on the show the first Wednesday of every month. And our patrons get to submit their questions. So we are going to be talking with Scott Koblish, and I do believe we have several questions from our patrons and some good ones too. That
I took a sneak peek. There's some good questions in there.
Yeah, and some not so good. We'll let them figure out which ones are which.
Yeah.
So yeah, and listen, if you want to be a patron of the show, and sure, there's perks. You get to ask questions. You get this really cool Captain. What would Cap do challenge coin, and some other things. You don't have to wait for submissions on the Facebook page. Entered automatically into our contest. All kinds of cool stuff. You
can put it on your. It comes with an icon you can put on your Bumble or Tinder page.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what are you really doing? You are helping support the show so that we can pay our bills and have some cool things to give away. And so one of the things I know I mentioned in the last podcast, Bob, is that if we get the next 3 people to go on Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review, we are going to give away the Captain America #1 Taco Bell exclusive edition.
Oh, it is an exclusive collector's edition. Right?
It really is.
Yeah.
You know what? There were a bunch made, but not too many saved. I mean, they all want these little, the kiddies got them in their little
with their greasy fingers all over them.
Yeah. So
hot sauce.
So you're not going to find this comic just anywhere.
No.
Right. So, but we get 3 people to give us a 5-star review, and one of those 3 people is going to get this mailed out to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good
after listening to tonight's show, I guarantee they're going to be like, "Oh my God, I want that book."
Yeah. And if you want to learn more information about how you can become a patron, go to CaptainAmericaComicBookFans.com. And at the bottom of the page, there is some information on how you can become a patron and the cool perks you get along with that. Also, if you are new to the show and you're like, oh, I'm really interested in hearing the various guests that you've had on the show, go to CaptainAmericaComicBookFans.com/category/interview. And then that one it'll pop up, and that'll be, just the dozens of interviews that we've had over the last 2 to 3 years, I guess, 2.5 years, something like that.
Yeah. And there's some goodies in there, Rick. And sometimes, we've been doing this for a while now. It's unless you look at that list and you're like, oh my God, there's some heavy hitters in there. I
know. It's interesting because we're talking to Scott Koblish today. He's the inker, but we've talked to the penciler, Ron Garney, on the show. We've talked to the writer, Mark Waid, on the show. We've talked to the editor, Tom Brevoort, right? So,
right, yeah.
Now we finally got Scott. So, you know what? My bucket list is full now.
Right. We got to get the letterer.
We got to get Caramanga.
Caramanga, right?
We got to get, because he is the letterer and has been for many, many years. But he actually did end up writing the Taco Bell special. Yeah. But dude, we need to get Caramanga on the show.
Yeah, I think it'd be fun to talk to.
Yeah, we've had editors, we've had artists, we've had pencilers, we have inkers, we've had colorists, we've had writers, but we have yet to have a letterer.
Yeah.
I think Joe Caramanga should be our first.
I think he should be too.
Yeah.
Legendary.
Totally. All right, Bob, we have anything else we want to get to before we get to Scott?
Yeah, I think so, Rick. I really liked your idea about our next top 10 show, but I think we should wait until after the interview to share it with our listeners.
Oh, that's what they call in the business, Bob, a tease.
Oh, the business. Oh, and a tease. You make it sound so intriguing. What business are we talking about?
None your business. All right.
Oh yeah, that business.
Right. Yeah.
I know that one. My wife's in it.
Oh, yeah. You know what? You know what is so funny is they used to say, what did they say? Oh, he's giving me the business, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know why that always reminds me of remember the show Leave It to Beaver,
Right. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And talking about giving the business. I think I have something like Wally would say, you know,
Does have a certain Wally-esque
right?
sound to it. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
Beav, why are you giving me the business?
Eddie Haskell's giving him the business.
Oh my gosh, that totally reminds me. So if for Eddie Haskell, right? He was like the the mischievous kid, but he
Mhm.
was always like super polite to the parents,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And and here's the thing. I was raised to be respectful to parents and to elders and so on, right? And so when I used to go over to my best friend's house, and I would go over and I would say something like, oh hi, Mrs. Samus, it's
You're
you
looking lovely.
yeah, I would compliment her, right? I would say like,
You
oh,
were the Eddie Haskell of your generation. Is that what you're
here's
saying?
the thing. Here's
Yeah.
the thing. I was the Eddie Haskell without being the jerk Eddie Haskell. Like I
Uh-huh.
didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't bad. I didn't do anything mischievous. I was just being polite.
Well, then you were more
And
like Wally.
yeah, but here's the thing. My friend Jeff told me one day, he goes, my mom doesn't trust you. She calls you
Uh,
like an Eddie Haskell.
yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like,
I see.
but I was so offended. I was like, but why? I'm like, I'm sincere. I'm just being,
Yeah.
uh,
You gotta like throw in a curveball every now and again just to make them think that like, okay, you're not hiding something. You've got some rough edges. Otherwise, they
yeah,
think you're hiding something.
that's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
Good advice. I gotta
Uh,
remember to tell my son that one.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Steal some silverware. Uh, the other thing too about, did you used to watch Leave It to Beaver?
Yeah, I watched reruns, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was a fun show. I can't remember. It was some comedian was talking about watching an episode. It was just like, watching it and then hearing them and talk, and then but totally like taking it out of out of context.
Uh-huh.
Where the mom was like, Ward, you were a little hard on the beaver last night.
Yeah. That's good
Oh,
stuff.
I tell you what. All right, should we get Scott out of the
Oh
green room?
yeah, he's been waiting there long enough. Let's bring him on out.
All right.
Uma pausa no seu podcast para falar sobre a beleza, essa força poderosa que nos move. No Grupo L'Oréal, nós criamos a beleza com sustentabilidade. Utilizamos em nossas embalagens 85% de plástico PET de origem reciclada. 65% dos ingredientes vieram de base biológica ou derivados de minerais abundantes. Grupo L'Oréal, nós criamos a beleza que move o mundo.
Interrompemos esse podcast para perguntar: quem você quer ser?
Designer, engenheira, pedagoga,
administrador.
Quer saber? O Senac EAD é nota máxima no MEC. Tem cursos de diversas áreas, com conteúdo elaborado por especialistas do mercado e professores mestres e doutores. Ainda tem o Senac Carreiras, conectando estudantes a vagas de emprego em todo o país. Saiba mais em ead.senac.br/graduação.
Our guest today started his career as an inker in the early 1990s, but has turned his focus to penciling the last 10 years. During that time, he has worked on hundreds of stories and thousands of pages. You may know him as the artist on Deadpool for 6 years, including setting a Guinness World Record, which we'll get to that later. For Captain America, he inked Ron Garney during the end of Volume 1 and then inked Dale Eaglesham on Volume 3. He also worked on the character American Dream, Shannon Carter, in the miniseries Last Planet Standing, Avengers Next, and her own solo story, American Dream. You may have also seen his penciling inking the series of graphic books titled How to Read Comics the Marvel Way. But he might be most excited to talk about his Captain America Taco Bell comic. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you? It's about time that Taco Bell special had its time in the sun.
Yes, yeah, I joke about that because when I mentioned it, when asking you to come on the show, that's exactly what you said. You said, quote, "It's high time that someone talked to me about that Captain America Taco Bell promotional comic." Now you did follow it up with an LOL, so I knew you were joking.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it went out there. I'm sure it sold millions of copies. It's one of those comics that when you're working on it, it doesn't seem like it'll make any impact and anybody will even know. But I'm sure that it went out to every single Taco Bell in the nation, which is thousands of stores. So it's all these licensing products are always so strange. I did a lot of licensing stuff in the 90s too at Marvel, and Pizza Hut things and stuff for the Universal Marvel restaurant, and Burger King and McDonald's and all these things that just they pop up every once in a while. There was a Spider-Man cereal, which was great because they let me. I'd sign my name on it underneath Sal Buscema's name, and they'd initially taken it off, but then they put it back on before it got printed up. So I would walk down the grocery aisle, and there's my name, which is that's pretty cool,
Oh yeah.
So
That's
little
awesome.
things like that. Yeah, I'd always been open to doing stuff for the licensing department. It was just a real gas to work on all sorts of weird things that show up on like SpaghettiO cans and things like that. So
Well, I want to talk to you about that Taco Bell America giveaway, Captain America giveaway. Oh, excuse me, exclusive collector's edition Captain
Right.
America giveaway. I know it was one of 4 that Taco Bell distributed in 2009. And, Marvel has done other ones. They've done them for, obviously Taco Bell again in 2011, Harley Davidson, Norton Semantic, Campbell Soup, Kiehl's, and others over the years. So do you have any insights? Like how do those licensing deals get worked out? Where they produce those comics for giveaways?
Yeah, it depends. Well, there's been I've been there at Marvel for so long that there's been different people involved in different sections of it. But there was a creative services department in the 90s that was responsible for all that stuff. And then it just bounces around from editor to editor, I think. So like I remember Tom Brevoort had worked on that stuff back in the late 80s, early 90s. Then it went over to creative services. Then it bounced over to I guess it would be whatever editors would contact me about it. I'm trying to think. It's a section of the company that I don't know that a lot of editors want to do that sort of thing. Bill Roseman, I think, was doing some of that stuff for a while.
So Bob, he's not in licensing or marketing. Come on. So
Yeah.
what he really wants to know is how did you get the gig?
Oh, how did I get the gig? Like how did Marvel? Yeah. So how did I get the gig? In the 90s, I was always around. So I started work at Marvel doing art corrections as a Romita Raider, John Romita's little department there, and senior. And I got known as like a pretty good art corrections guy. So anytime they needed something to be art corrected, they would come to me at my desk. But then I went freelance, and then I think the licensing department, the creative services department, they needed something like a poster or something, or some sort of calendar fixed, and they couldn't get the Raider. The Raiders, the new Raiders weren't up to speed. Like they weren't good enough to fix whatever the thing was. So they came running to me, and then I just started doing stuff for the licensing department from then on. And I was always I lived in New York in the 90s. So I would just wander in, I'd drop off things, and then people would load me up with things before I left. They'd say, "Hey, can you do these 8 pages of Black Wolf? The rest of all the rats have left the sinking ship." So, or just some licensing thing. I'd drop off things, and people would stop me in the halls. Or
you got a lot. I mean, you mentioned already a bunch, but you also did a couple of the Avengers comics for the Army and Air Force Exchange Service.
I did. Yeah,
You
sure.
you did a free comic book day comic for Iron Man. You had a Target giveaway that had Cap and the Avengers in it. I mean, you were that guy.
I was that guy. I very rarely said no to anything, and I would just work 100 hours a week. So basically, that was my MO. Is I just was like the hardest working guy around, and then I just wouldn't say no to things. The only thing I did say no to, there was a Steve Ditko book that he was working on. That was it was Power Rangers. And I don't know if you know too much about Steve Ditko. He's an objectivist kind of fellow. So like his perspective on doing artwork was sort of based on contracts between people, and he had a certain amount of work that he was willing to do on certain things. And I remember they showed me the pages, and the pages were pretty much I would have had to do like the majority of the work, like 90% of the work on that thing. And I chose my own objectivist decision, which was I didn't really want to do his work for him for like an extra $25 a page. So, but I kind of wish I had done, at least a few.
You could
pages.
say you did. You could say you worked on Steve Ditko. Yeah.
Yeah. So I passed that one up, but that was my own choice. But very rarely did I say no to anything, and I always made the time for everything. And at the time I was single, or I was living just in New York, and I would just, I would get done around 4 or 5 in the morning, or, maybe 11 in the morning, and then drop things off, and then load up with a whole bunch of more things, and then skedaddle out. And it was fun. I had a great time. Like, Marvel was kind of my second home, especially through the 90s. And all the people there that were friends of mine, like are friends still. I just had lunch with one of the guys who used to be at Creative Services. So just today, just to have lunch and shoot the breeze. But all the people there were like family. So honestly, they were my second home. They were almost my primary home. When I worked on staff, I would get there at 9. I'd stop work at 6, and then I'd sit there and draw things for my portfolio, or do background inks, or do inking or penciling, like in the office until about 1 a.m.
Wow.
And then I take the train home, and then take the train back in, and then start it all over again, or walk down to my apartment or whatever. So I was there a lot. So
we obviously we're joking around, but we were talking last episode where we actually reviewed the Taco Bell.
No, you did not. Really?
Oh, totally.
Oh, we most certainly
last
did,
episode.
Scott.
Yeah. We went by panel, Scott.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. No.
Totally.
But,
I voiced the characters, Bob.
Inconceivable. I don't believe you. I'll have to find out. I'll have to wait until this episode shows up.
But we joked about it, but you sort of hit on a point where there's something like there's a little over 3,000, maybe 3,300 Taco Bells in the United States alone.
Yeah, sure.
And they all distribute those giveaways. So, anytime one of those comics lands in someone's hands who may not be exposed to a character before, it's an opportunity to reach a new reader, right?
Yeah.
And so they're hugely important for expanding the genre to new readers, I think. So
well, that's the way I approached it, especially that one. I did it in a more cartoony style than I even usually work in. I was trying to make it open and happy and enjoyable, and I thought that it was aimed clearly at like a younger readership. So I just took that under advisement when I sat down to draw it. They kind of talked to me about what you just said. They're trying to get it out in the hands of like people who aren't normally comic fans, in order to try and get them to try something.
Right. Yeah.
The direct market is absolutely wonderful, but it can be a little intimidating to new readers. So like once you get the bug, hopefully everyone would appreciate it in that sort of manner. It took me a while really, from my first comics to pick up the second comics, you know what I mean? So
Sure. So anyway, back to the Taco Bell, because, Rick will go on and on. He's got a Zek corner. He's got a Garney corner, but you know what he doesn't have, Scott? He doesn't have a Koblish corner. But you know who does? This guy.
Oh
right
my God.
Here. This
You
right
even
here.
have a page of it.
I most certainly do. And
I
I will tell you, Scott, this was the first piece of original art that this guy ever bought.
No.
Because I saw this and I was like, this is like super awesome, because it's got Nick Fury, it's got Captain America, they're busting down a door. Cap looks really pleased with themselves for knocking out all these Hydra agents.
Yeah.
And it was something we talked about last episode, is that, as you pointed out, it's a little cartoony, but it's really, really fun illustration. And there's so much detail.
Oh, good. Yeah, I had a blast. That page, I haven't seen it in forever. I remember being very happy with that page when it was done.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, especially all the Hydra agents on the floor.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many extras. Like there's Ultron and Wrecker on some video screens, and there's a She-Hulk poster on the wall.
Yeah.
And so were those things that you added just for fun, or did the writer Joe Caramagna add those in, or do you even remember?
I pretty much would have added all that stuff just for fun. I really enjoy like throwing in lots of little things here and there. It's a kind of I got to draw. There was one time I did a page of Avengers. I don't know if I'm even credited in it, but there's a page of Avengers, and it's with that character Deathcry, who was a Shi'ar like teenager.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she's upset about something. She was always having some sort of tantrum. She was upset about something. I think she was supposed to be like the Jubilee of the Avengers, but she ran upstairs, and I guess it's like a half a page. Like, I guess they weren't happy with the storytelling in the thing, so they grabbed me and I repenciled it, and I made it so she was running up the stairs. She was upset. And the dialogue, I knew the dialogue, and it was where she was like, you had never had any alien characters in the Avengers, so you don't trust me. Like, she was really upset. But I put like a whole bunch of posters in the background, and one of them I put Star Fox in there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
sure.
Like, Mantis, whatever.
I was like, Mantis and Star Fox, and I was just like, I just threw it in there just as a little dig. I don't think they even noticed it, but I just thought it was really funny, because I was like, that's not true. So I do like putting little things in the background here and there. Usually I try and make it serve the story, and I don't try and like have it so that it's too jarring, or I don't put it in the foreground. But I do like to throw in little things. I would do that on Deadpool all the time. There's usually just like a ton of little things that I would throw in there, and so.
Well, all right. So the marketing guy in me wants to know, in the Taco Bell comic, there was a Taco Bell cup on the bed. Was that for fun, or is that like product placement?
I think I would have put that in there too. Yeah. I don't remember that. I don't think that was supposed to be in there. Yeah. I would have fun with these things. Like, I did know some of the stuff that they'd always planned. So if like I could reinforce it or have it help out, like I would do it, and I thought, the thing that I loved about comics was just all the stuff that I would pour over endlessly in between issues. Like, so I'd pick up like Captain America, like 249, and then I would sit there and I would have to wait a whole month. And if I was lucky, I'd get 250. I don't think I even got 250. I think I would get like 252. So in the months in between, I would just pour over the issue that I had. And, you spot little things here and there. You look at how the inking is done, or how the penciling is done, or how the storytelling is done. Or you sort of, you obsess over, well, this is me at least. I would obsess over all the things that were said and all the little subplots and stuff like that. And I would sit and draw my own resolution to whatever cliffhanger there was, just waiting for the issue to come out. Like, so, I mean, for me, that was part of the joy of comics, is just all these little things that are everywhere in it and amongst it. So when I do comics, I do the same thing. I just try and pack them full of stuff, so that
and it comes through in your work. It's fun.
Fired up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally fun. Yeah, and I have to say, like, for instance, when I look at some of your Deadpool stuff, you know,
Mm.
it you know, and he's a fun character, right? I mean, you know, there's the whole, you know, fourth wall kind of breakdown and stuff like that. So you know, your sense of humor kind of comes out, you know, in some of those things.
Well, and humor's tough to do in comics, but yeah, I would get a script and it would have like 2 or 3 jokes on the page, and the thing about humor on in comics and in writing in general is it's one joke is good, it might hit or miss. 2 jokes are better, they might hit or miss. But if you can jam like 5 or 6 jokes in there, then like chances are someone will leave that page having laughed at least once. So I felt it was kind of my duty to just jam things in. Like there was a Deadpool story where Deadpool was being roasted. It was sort of like a meta physical kind of like take on he'd just died, so like they had a roast. And at some point there was like a villains table. Like I'd organized the tables. I don't know if it was in the script, but I'd organized the table. So I had all these villains, and I threw I put Hitler in there, and he was of course the villain from issue 26 or something like that, but he wasn't in the script anywhere. And I threw him in, and I had him at the same table as Magneto, just because.
Sure.
And you know, like I had you know, Magneto kind of cranky about the fact that Hitler was there, but I just had them there. And I remember the original script was that Storm was talking about something about Sabretooth, and I had Sabretooth in there, but like the writers just changed it so that like the actual dialogue that was coming out of Storm's mouth once I was done and once they had a shot at it again was why is Hitler here, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I kind of felt like it was fun because it was them talking directly to me as opposed to the actual readers, you know. But it was just fun to do that kind of stuff. Like if I throw in something, and I picked it up from George Perez too, because I was working on Legion of Three Worlds with him just about the time that I started penciling full time. And George would get a plot, and we would all get the plot. We would take a look at it, and George would send in a page, you know, every other day or every day or whatever it was, and he would have a whole bunch of notes in the email. So he would say, "Well, I was thinking originally it was this, and then I changed it to this, and this is why I changed it to this, and this is why I did that." So I just thought, well, that's how we do it, right? So. So I've been, you know, I monkey around with scripts when I get them. Not in a bad way. I try to make sure that everything's there, but I'll just add in things, you know, if I can. Like, you know, it's stuff that trying to makes the sequences work a little bit better, or the movement from panel to panel work a little bit better, or you know, I'll add in characters if they're in town. Like I'll put background characters or cars, or, you know, I try and fill up the space with things that people can look at, understand where they are, and understand what the stakes are, so that you can kind of have a pretty solid reading experience. But I don't know, that's the kind of stuff that I like to do.
So what else? I mean, you mentioned George Perez, or Perez. You know, you worked with a lot of pencilers over the years. Have any of them, because of working with them, influenced you in how you work today? Has there anyone that just, whether it was an indirect or a direct something that they did, or just by merely working with them and you inking them, and then how does that affected your penciling?
It has, yeah. You know, I looked at it as a long apprenticeship. You know, when I was inking over a lot of different people, I inked over probably it was about 150 or 160 different inker or pencilers in about a 15-year period. And I really liked it when there were pencilers who were way better than I was, a penciler or a storyteller, that I could learn something from it. George was really interesting because he approached a page, I think, differently than most people do. He would break it down into blocks. So normally people break down something that's happening in a page. You can either break it down just for pacing, or you can break it down for composition. But for George, his composition was little blocks. So he would do like, let's say he had an explosion happening, he would put a whole bunch of like inset panels all up and down and around in order to show the reactions or what was happening to the people simultaneously as the action that was happening in the explosion or in one part of the story. So it's something that he would do where it sort of stretched things out. There was a TV show called 24 that at the end of every sequence, they would have a little ticking clock, and then they would show what essentially were comic book panels. But it would be like, this is happening here, and this is happening here, and this is happening here, and this is all supposed to be with the ticking clock. That it's all happening at the same time, and that was George in his design. He would oftentimes have, especially in battle scenes, there would be, one person would be saving somebody over here and one person would be fighting somebody else over here, and it's all happening concurrently. And that's a very rare thing. Most people don't really do that in stories. I picked up a lot from Ron Garney, interestingly enough, that I keep noticing in my penciling. Ron has a very well, it's a very expressive way of drawing when he's under time pressure. And I've noticed that it would get more energetic and bigger and blockier as he went on during the run that we were working on. And I really enjoyed a lot of that sort of really like, it's hard to, I would use the word like a powerful line, like you would have a big, thick line next to something that you wouldn't normally associate with a big thick line. And I was just doing something similar. You would use the side of his pencil. There aren't a lot of guys who use the side of the pencil. John Romita Jr. does it a lot, but I was doing it just a little bit ago on some story that I'm working on. And because I had a character that had a shield, and I thought if I just did a couple like quick, fast, heavy lines on it to give it some sort of like a emotional heft or some sort of speed heft, or I don't know, heft in general. And I just threw it in there, and I was like, oh, that's something like Ron would do. Like things pop up like that all the time for me. There are artists, of course, that I was working over where I would see what they did, and I didn't have respect isn't the right word, but I would sit there and I would go, well, I don't want to do that. So sometimes you're defined by the things you don't do as much as you're defined by the things that you do. And there's people that I really love their work, inking over them, especially towards the end. I was inking over Giffen and George, and those were the guys that really, it was super easy to ink over those guys because I knew what they needed automatically in my head, and could give it to them on the page. Guys that were starting out, that's always a little more difficult. You don't know exactly where they're coming from. You can usually see like their heroes through the work. Like you could tell if somebody really liked Alan Davis or Joe Madureira, or you can usually spot some things just in the structure of the face or the pacing of the page. And that's a little tougher to ink over, because then like if I'm inking over a guy that like has a whole bunch of like he'll have an Alan Davis riff on one page, and then I don't know, some other riff of some other artist on another page. That's a little tough, because then I, in my head, I ink it as if it would be the better Alan Davis page.
So yeah, like a Paul Neary, right?
Yeah, and then it becomes like a little disjointed as a result, because I'm not pulling it together, whereas I think another inker that wouldn't be so observant with all those things might be able to pull all this stuff together with their own single style. I had a difficult time that throughout most of my career. Well, it was an advantage in one side and a disadvantage in another, that I was very versatile. So like I I would do different things with different artists. So, and then you click differently with different people too. So there was one time I'd inked over Stuart Immonen for like an extended period, like a year, maybe a little longer. And he had a really, something that I just attacked with a big brush and really big, bulky black areas and wide open white areas. And I just really, I hammered home like, you know, some dry brush stuff and some big splotches. And then I had to ink over, oh, who was it? Maybe, oh, it was a Tom Grummett issue. It was a Tom Grummett issue, and I was still in that mindset. And I inked Tom as if it was that, and that was a big mistake because it didn't work. You know, it didn't work with that. He didn't need those huge lines. He needed some like thinner, more expressive lines. You know, so I don't know, that kind of stuff would bite me in the butt every once in a while. But as I've gotten further and further away from people, I think I've gotten a little bit better at attacking my own style and figuring out what to do with it. So if that makes sense.
It does. It does. It's always fascinating to talk with artists and who have, especially inkers. I will say, because we've had pencilers, we have inkers on here, and I think inkers, to your point, like a penciler can come up with their own style, and they have that, and that's kind of what they stick with. Whereas I think an inker, especially a finisher, has to, you know, complement in many ways. Like when we had you know, Joe Rubenstein on, he would talk about how, you know, he wanted to make sure that when he was on John Byrne versus Frank Miller, you know, you have to what you were saying, you had to compliment them, right? And you had to, you know, make sure that you give them what they needed, as you said.
Yeah. There's an interview from Terry Austin that I read very young. It was one of those Peter Sanderson interviews with the X-Men people, those X-Men compendiums, and there was a line in there from Terry that stuck with me, where he would give the penciler what they need, not necessarily what they want, and that was always my approach to anybody that I was inking over, and of course your own skills are, you know, get in the way of what you want to deliver, but I got pretty good at figuring out what to do. I don't necessarily have a tremendous amount of patience, like enough to ink a guy like Art Adams or something like that.
Oh yeah.
But
you know,
with
George Perez is very detailed. I mean, Art Adams,
yeah,
George Perez, they're both very
George
detailed.
was funny because yeah, it was everything he would do. If he had like 3 lines, I would give him 10. Like I kind of knew what it was that he was looking for, because I was such a big fan of his work. And there was a series of Teen Titans that he started inking over himself, and those I remember looking at them and thinking, oh, okay, that's what he wants, that's what he needs. And then like 20 years later, I was able to do that for him. But yeah, for George, you know, all that detail, it never bothered me at all. I'd plow through a page or two a day. Like, you know, I'd get a page in the morning, or a couple pages in the morning, and I'd get them done over the next 15 hours or whatever. Time would just kind of fly past. And, you know, I would always fill in things. There was in the Legion of Three Worlds stuff, I loved interlac. So I would just throw in a lot of like interlac in the backgrounds.
Can you tell the listeners what that means?
Oh, I'm sorry. In the Legion of Superheroes, it's set in the 30th century, or probably 31st century at this point, but it's set in the future about 1,000 years from now. So the language is, the written language is a little bit different. Keith Giffen kind of came up with it, I think. And he would do it just to sort of make little jokes in the background. But at some point they codified it and set it up so that it was an actual written language that had a written, you know, an alphabet, you know. So I would put the things in the background, like there's a Legion of Three Worlds, like a big spread where the Legion is fighting the villains, like I guess I forget what they're called, but all the big villains. So they're just fighting them, and it's in like a Times Square set in the future. So I put in like all these different names of all the previous creators on the book. So like George Hamilton and Kurt Swan, but I put them all in Interlac. And the stock market was having trouble, so at the time, so I put in like a stock market ticker. And I put in like things like Bismol was having a terrible day in the stock market.
So you did this in that language, Interlac.
Yeah, I would write it all in that language. Yes,
that's cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really fun, but I would spend just hours and hours just amusing myself trying to add little things here and there. If the floor was sort of delineated, like I just put a few more things on the floor, you know what I mean, to fix things up. Or rubble too. Rubble was super fun. Because the thing with George is that that's separate from other artists. His foundation was always stable. So it didn't matter how much detail you put in there, the foundation was always perfect. Sometimes you can put, I call them the sweater artists. There's a couple guys where and I won't name any names, but there's a couple guys.
You could totally do that here. That's okay.
No, where you would look at the panel and let's say the eyes, it's a close-up of a face. Let's say the eyes wouldn't match up on the plane that they were supposed to be on, but they would look good in the composition. So inside the panel, you would have like a narrow kind of thing, and be off to the side. And this eye would be too high up. And then if you changed it though, it changed the composition of the panel. So it's like pulling a thread on a sweater. You're going to ruin the sweater if you pull on it too much. So sometimes you were just better off leaving things alone because the composition looked nice. That's really what the artist was kind of intentionally or unintentionally focusing on. That happened with Kirby a lot too. You would look at Kirby's stuff, and the design work was really what balances out the panel oftentimes. So there's guys that it may not be realistic to have that huge black line on a Kirby arm, but it's there to indicate force or movement or to balance out a soft rounded line somewhere else in the arm. So it's good to know those sorts of things as I move along doing my own artwork. I've noticed recently that there's a whole bunch of things that are the faces will be a little bit up and the eyes have been up a little bit and to the right. So I've been turning the page upside down before I ink it just to fix any of those things. I don't know what's happening in that situation, but I don't know.
That's cool that you fix it by turning it upside down. It's interesting.
Yeah, you fix it turning upside down or turning it or even changing your position at the desk. Sometimes that changes things. If you don't have the page at a 90-degree angle to you, you're gonna make the legs a little bit too long. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a perspective thing that's going on. The thing that's too far away from you, you're gonna draw a little bit bigger just to make it seem like it's the right size. But you can get tricked into doing that unless your desk is at an angle. Or whatever your drawing surface is at an angle. So there's little tricks like that. You turn it upside down, you turn it backwards, you turn it sideways, just to double check yourself. You're the only editor really.
All right. So we are required by law to talk about Captain America every once in a while. So so getting back to your Taco Bell comic,
we are.
We got to do this. So up until this point, when this comic came out, we had not seen Steve Rogers in the Marvel Universe 616 because he'd been dead for 3 years.
Oh,
and while this was Earth 3588, according to what I read, the book you worked on, it was fun seeing Steve Rogers as Cap again. And so I don't know did you get a little thrill being the one who brought Steve back before Ed Brubaker did? Because the Reborn miniseries didn't happen until a few months later.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Yeah, I love it. I mean, some of these characters live a little bit outside of time for me. So like whatever's happening in their books, if I'm doing some sort of license thing, like I just try and put in the essence of whatever I think is there in order to give it because the thing, no matter what they do to Captain America, within a few years it's kind of reset a little bit. There's always some sort of thing that happens that that takes them off the field a little bit or moves them down the line, like Captain America's like 100 years old all of a sudden, or he's he's nomad, or you know what I mean, like but there's always an essence to the character that you want to try and get across. And in a project like that, it's really important to try and say, like, this is Steve Rogers, this is what he looks like, this is how he behaves. I always felt that a great thing about Captain America was that he had such integrity and honor and dignity and a sense of self-worth, didn't really put other people down. And that's the kind of thing that I would key into it. So when I'm drawing him standing around, like talking to Nick Fury, he's upright. He's well aware of his position and his place in the room. You know what I mean? Like he's pretty well grounded, but he's never going to be sort of sneakily doing something that's underhanded. You know what I mean? Or he's not going to be slumping or slouching, or I feel like the guy has a real presence, or should have a real presence in the room every single time, and that people would defer to him, especially younger characters like New Warriors or things like that. Even the Avengers, the guy literally has to stand above everybody else, even though he doesn't have the power set to be able to stand toe to toe in a physical way with some of the people like the Hulk or Giant Man or something like that. But he's got to lead by example, and he's got to lead by a sense of dignity and a sense of honor and compassion that will make people sort of stand up and be their own best selves around him. So you can have a character like a Nick Fury that has a job to do, but he respects Captain America's perspective on him. Whereas like Nick would just do the thing that he needs to do no matter what the consequences. Cap isn't willing to do things like that normally. So it creates a great sense of story and a great sense of character and purpose that I whenever I'm drawing him, I try and give that illusion to.
Well, now listen, you're talking to two people here who 100% agree with you as far as the way to approach Steve and his moral center. So you mentioned drawing him, and there's a certain way you draw him. Bob and I have a debate, and we have a debate on something. I was curious where you stand. Right. Which arm does Cap normally hold his shield?
I always have it on the left.
Okay. Is this just simply known, or does like editorial request that? Like why do people draw him with in the shield typically in his left hand?
That's a great question. I remember one of the first Captain Americas I ever picked up. He's lecturing this shield agent who's torqued off at him, and he punches at Captain America, and Cap's got the shield like just in that position because it's on his left side, and he lectures the shield agent for never lead with your left, and I thought that was a weird thing to say, especially now my wife does boxing and things like that. I don't think that that's a hard and fast rule, and I'm uncertain as to whether the writer would have ever known anything about that either. But I remember it being a thing that Cap kind of does, like that he's a righty, and that the shield operates kind of as like something that he would use on his left hand. Oftentimes, and this is early on, like Captain America, if he had a gun, he doesn't obviously have a gun very often, but he would be most guns are made for shooting in the right hand. So he would need to have his left hand with his shield. But that's my perspective on it. I just assumed that it was just something to do with how he would have approached shooting a gun in World War II, and how he would have approached, fighting people with your right hand or your left hand. I just assumed that Steve was righty. A couple people that I know, in my head, I have them as lefties when I'm drawing them, but in Cap in my head is a righty. So
continuing on the whole Captain America theme. So you inked Dave Hoover in Captain America 439 back in May 1995. And then you joined Mark Waid and Ron Garney as the new creative team after Mark Grunwald's 10-year run. And so you were on that first issue, 445, when it launched, and then you came back and you were on 449 through 454, which was the last issue.
Yeah.
What was that like, being part of that amazing run post Grunwald, number one? And then what was it like to find out the series being canceled and you were being replaced with the Heroes Reborn relaunch?
Yeah, well, that was a really interesting period for me. Like you had mentioned, I'd done some inking over Dave Hoover, rest in peace, Dave's way. But I had inked over Dave, and it was during a weird period of Captain America. He was in an armor, I think it was like Iron Cap, or in a suit of armor at the time. And I'd done some inking over Cap in the Avengers books too. So I think Angel Medina had done, I don't know if he designed the armor or if he just did a really good job on it, but there was a weird period of time for Captain America, and I kind of knew it. I wasn't, I think a lot of people were a little cranky about the book at the time, and Mark had done some wonderful things on the book, don't get me wrong. That period of time after Cap Wolf and things like that, where things were, it was time to have some new blood. So when Ron came on, I didn't do the first issue. I forget who the inker was, maybe Mark Pennington or I forget who the inker was, but the first issue, Ron had just gotten done with being inked by Tom Palmer for about, I want to say 2 or 3 years. And I think he really wanted to see what he could do on his work. So there was that one inker, they didn't get along. Then Ralph Macchio came up to me and said,
Dennis Rodier? Or was that?
No, Dennis was after me. So I can't remember exactly who it was that inked the first issue of that particular run. But it didn't work out for whatever reason. And because I think that what happened was Ron had been inked for so long by a guy like Tom Palmer that people kind of expected that that's what he wanted to draw like. But I don't think that he wanted to draw like that at all. So like when I got the pages, the first thing I did was I did like a really, really, really hyper detailed work over him. Like hyper detailed, like if there was a black space that he filled in just roughly, I would put in like 4,000 lines. And I was kind of happy with it. I remember taking some of it. I was moving at the time when I was working on Captain America. So I was moving into the city, and I remember working on all that stuff at the time. And I went where I was working on pages. There's a shot where Sharon Carter first appears, and I did that at the wedding like an hour or two beforehand. And but I did a ton of lines, just a ton of lines, and then I forget. Yeah, I think he wanted to try Mike Matchlin, or maybe
it was Mike Manley was on.
Mike Manley, that's
issue.
it. So,
yeah,
Mike Manley did an issue. Mike Manley was an artist himself, like just great stuff. So I don't know how that one popped up. And then he had Dennis Rodier do a couple issues. And then I remember walking through the office. I didn't take it personally when the first time that he clearly wanted to try a whole bunch of different people. So they came to me a second time for that issue for
449.
449, thank you. So they came back to me for that, and they were like, hey, we'd like to have you as the inker on the rest of the run. And I was like, that'd be great. And I had given it some thought, so I started to do something different with my inks and the approach to it. And I think I got a little bit better. I really knew what I wanted to do over Ron's work by 454, but of course we were gone by then. That was like the last issue. But I really feel like that last issue, I nailed it. I was like, now I know what I have to do. Now I know what should be happening. But then we had that long interregnum. So yeah, I was caught off guard by the book being canceled. I was happy to get it back, and then excited to work on it. And then I forget when along the line I found out that the book had been canceled and was going to be given over to Image and to Rob's people and Rob himself. But I remember being a little stunned and a little cranky, and and I didn't comport myself well. You know what I mean? Like I should have taken it with a little bit less. I was cranky. But
well, it's funny.
Just knowing that whatever comes around goes around, and you'll have a chance at it again or something like that. But I remember thinking like because Captain America is just one of my all-time favorites, and I was so happy to be working on the book in whatever capacity, and to have the book like just yanked out just felt kind of it felt kind of tough at the time. So, but again, these are things that the company. There's been so many people working on these books for so many years that I guess in the end, it doesn't really matter. But at the time, like, Marvel had only been around for 30 years, and, Mark Grunwald had written or edited most of, I don't know, probably like half of the books, and then, Kirby had done the same, and Stan and Roy Thomas. So there was only a handful of people that had worked on the book at that time. And I felt like, it was like, I was really excited to be on the book in whatever capacity I could be on the book. And it just sucked. I remember handing in the last couple pages and just being kind of depressed about the loss of the book, So anyway, it wasn't the greatest time for that sort of stuff. But and then I think I wrote on like one page, like some mean little thing to Rob. I mean, I've never really, I should say that Rob did an amazing job on the book, because we were at about 40,000, the entire run that I was on. We were there for a year, and we just couldn't move the needle in sales, and it just, we had the Red Skull in there. You have, there was the great, Man Without a Country kind of stuff. I just didn't seem to really move the needle any on the sales. And, I have to give Rob credit, because when he comes along, he takes the sales from like 40,000 to, I don't know, what was it, like 900,000 or something like that, or 500,000, or it just bounced up the amount of people reading the book by like a tremendous amount. So, and that perspective, you can't really fault the guy and you can't really fault the company for deciding to do something like that. But right. It was so early in my career, it did hurt. And, as I've been around now 30 years, these kind of things hurt a little bit less each time out, but especially at that age, I was in my early 20s, and I was really excited about working on Captain America, and really felt like I was, putting some good work in. And but again, sales, you just don't know what's going to happen with sales. So
right.
That's always the thing to sort of watch it back on.
So Bob mentioned his piece of original art you created.
Yeah.
And but now I have to mention mine.
Yeah.
So
there it is. Wow. Yeah, there. Yeah, that's the one that I wrote a little like a snarky comment on.
Yeah, you wrote "Eat Your Heart Out, Rob."
Yeah, because it was a great page. Like,
it's an amazing page. It's a double page splash, and for the listeners at home, it is the double page splash of Captain America in the jungle going up against an army. just incredible odds. And Ron drew him very brazen. And when we had Ron on the show, he actually said this is one of his favorite pieces he ever drew. And so I'm just thrilled to have it. It's a double page splash. I have it framed on my wall in the Ron Garney corner. But yeah, you wrote at the bottom, eat your heart out, Rob, which I thought was just kind of like a gentle poke. I didn't think it was being crass or mean or anything like that. I took it as you had pride in your work and you were obviously upset to be leaving, and hey, Rob, beat this kind of thing. I saw it was playful.
Yeah, that was but it reads differently when it's just in text as opposed to, but you had the right idea. That was my general, it was like 4 a.m. when I finished that thing. And I was a little intemperate. I shouldn't have written it, but I that page, that spread especially was one of my favorite things to ever ink. I just thought Ron did an incredible job on it. Like, you're right about the great thing about that particular one is that Cap's face is almost completely hidden. It's mostly in shadow. So you've got this element of the character almost being iconic, like an icon as opposed to a human being. And Ron just really nailed it. And of course, the dialogue on that one is Mark Waid had put it in there where it was like, you take the people to safety, I'm going to go fight this army, and that was really, it was just a wonderful thing. Like, I really felt that we peaked as best we could, and handed it off. And there was a little bit of like, take that and let's see you beat that kind of thing, which you want to have a friendly rivalry if you can.
Yeah. And have you ever spoken with Rob?
I was at a convention where his booth was next to mine, but he wasn't there very frequently, and I'm not sure that he knew who I was at the time. This is after I'd worked on Deadpool, or maybe I was still working on Deadpool, and I mostly talked to his assistant, who seemed like a very nice fellow, and had nothing but good things to say about Rob. So, the one time that I did get to talk to him briefly, seemed a little distracted, but lots of people want things from him all the time. So it's difficult at conventions. It's not, unless you're having dinner with somebody, it's a little difficult there's lights and crowds and noise and things, and you just give everybody a little bit of leeway to not being their best. But he was respectful and kind, and so like I just took it at that. And of course, I didn't really mention that I'd worked on the Captain America stuff before. Not a lot of people associate my ink work with my pencil work. It's almost like 2 different groups of people. So anyway, but that page, I'm glad that it has a good home, because that page I had with me, or that spread that I had with me for decades. I kept it.
Oh, did you really?
Oh yeah, I kept it the whole time, all the way up till about, I want to say 2019. But I had it from the day that I got it back in 1995 or whenever, and all the way through like a couple of years ago. So I'm glad, and I would just keep it on the wall.
Oh, totally. It's framed. So. It's not going anywhere, and it has found a good home. So I feel very fortunate.
I'm glad it deserves a good home. It's a really great spread. I would put it up there with any Kirby Captain America stuff, and I hold the Kirby Captain America stuff in the highest regard. The Zek stuff too. So depending on the page, but yeah, absolutely good. I'm glad it has a good home.
You mentioned earlier that you got your break, I think, with Romida's Raiders, which was the Marvel Apprenticeship Program, the Art Apprenticeship Program that Jim Shooter started in '93. But how did you make the transition from inking to penciling? Was there something that you consider your big break?
Yeah, actually. So I had a lot of difficulty switching from inking to penciling. I could pencil. That's really how I got the job as a Romita Raider. I showed John my pencil samples and got the job that way, but I knew how to ink, and not the other Raiders didn't know how to ink. So it was always hinged upon me to finish up the work. So I got known as a pretty good inker around the office. And then what winds up happening is after a company that you do something well, they are really reluctant to give you up into a different position. I wound up, I couldn't get any traction. I would show my pencils around, but they would say, that's great. Can you do this book? I need it to be inked. And I'd go, of course, because I needed to eat, so the real thing that happened is I did my own comic, and then I started showing that around. I sent it out to a whole bunch of different publishers, and one company called Platinum Studios here in Los Angeles, they wrote back and they were like, we love this. This is great. And I was like, will you publish it? And they said, no, but we do have a script here that we would like to have penciled and inked. And I was like, that would be great. And so in between the raindrops, whenever I was doing, I'd be inking over Giffen or Perez or other folks, I would pencil out these pages, and it was a really crummy rate. It was $10 a page, but I got it done. I got all 100 pages done, and then in 4 covers, and it got published. And unbeknownst to me, the writer of the book had written it 5 years prior, but had started writing stuff for Marvel, and had started writing for Marvel in the Marvel Adventures department, which was the kids line that they were trying. And he showed the weapon. The book is called The Weapon. And he showed the weapon to the editor there. And the editor was like, and Fred Van Lente is the writer on it. And Fred said, hey, can I work with this guy here at Marvel? And he was like, sure, why not? I was inking other things. I was inking actually American Dream at the same time. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to pencil and ink like stuff without like dropping something. So I had to drop George Perez for a little bit, and then like I wanted to drop American Dream, but the editor called me up and tore me a new one and was like, you promised you'd finish this. So I was like, all right, I'll finish it. And I just worked super late hours, but that's how I got my foot in the door. Is I was able to do something for some other publisher, and then luckily enough, there was the writer was there at Marvel, so it was kind of a weird way of getting back in, because I'd shown my pencils to everybody I could, but it just wasn't generating any response until they saw me as like working for some rival company, or I don't even know if they knew that they had me inking a whole bunch of things over, and sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So yeah, that's how I got in. I broke into penciling that way. And then I did a lot of stuff in the Marvel Adventures department, and then the assistant editor on that became a full editor on Deadpool, and asked me to do work on Deadpool, and I turned it down initially. I was doing some storyboards and I didn't have time, but I'd heard a podcast with the writers on it, and they were so great and they were really funny. And I wrote back, I said, is it too late for me to take the project after all? And that's how I got on that.
Wow. And you had a really nice 6-year run on
yeah,
Deadpool.
6 years is a long time in comics.
It really is.
Yeah,
and then
it really is. Yeah.
we mentioned before that you set a Guinness World Record. So this was for the cover to Deadpool 27, which was back in 2014, where you had 232 characters on one cover, which set a record. And so how cool was that to make it into the record books?
That was fun. I didn't know they were gonna try and do that, like send it over to the record. Otherwise I would have put a few more characters in, like I had some room. I didn't put Hit Monkey or the Punisher in there, so I could have added a few more in, but I didn't know that they would do it. And then the record had been beaten at some point later on. And then the record holder came up to me at a convention this fall and said, hey, he goes, "Hey, it's good to meet you. I'm the guy that beat your record." And I was like, "Oh, it's a pleasure to meet you." Like, I recognize like how hard it is to put all this work into doing something like that. And at the end of the conversation, he said, I said, "Well, what was the number again that you beat me at?" And he was like, 313. And I was like, "Okay, all right, all right." Okay, good.
Note to self.
Yeah, note to self. I wrote it down in my head, and 313. And then my wife gave me for Christmas a the Marvel Unlimited app. It's you can see pretty much everything Marvel has.
Yeah.
It's like 30,000 comics or something like that, and got me thinking. I was Spider-Man was on like issue 922 or something, so I was like, boy, 1,000 would like beat that record. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I contacted the Spider-Man editor. I said, "Hey, how about like we do, I'll do like 1,000 characters from the Spider-Man universe, like, Dr. Octopus and all the background characters, and because there's got to be 1,000 at least at this point." And the editor was like, "Well, I don't know. It's not going to be for another couple of years." But on the email chain, Tom Brewer was on there, and he was like, "Well, Fantastic Four 700's coming up." And I was like, I could totally find 700 characters in that. So I just threw my hat in the ring, and I was like, and he's like, "Well, we're about to solicit it, so you've got about 3 weeks to do it." So I was like, "All right." So, and initially I was going to do it on a wraparound. I had done the Deadpool cover, but that was really challenging to get 700 characters in there. So I begged for a little more space, and I got it, thankfully. It's about 711. I overshot a little bit after paring it down. I went through every single issue of the Fantastic Four, took screenshots of anything that I kind of like deemed as like something great to be able to use. Like I found about 8 different versions of Herbie that I put in there, and then like all the different Heralds of Galactus, and Tom and I talked about it. We felt that the Ultimates universe Fantastic Four would be a little bit too confusing in the way that everything worked in the layout, so we left the Ultimate Universe stuff out, but everything else is from the book. There's a tremendous amount. The Fantastic Four is really the starting point for the Marvel universe, and a lot of stuff appears in it for the first time. So like you would have like not only just the things you think of as Galactus and Doctor Doom, but the new Warriors made their first appearance in the book. You would have, I had a whole bunch of different
Black Panther.
Yeah, Black Panther. Just there's lots of things that Silver Surfer, the Inhumans, that kind of stuff, and that was the easy stuff to pick. And there's only one Jim Lee character that made it in there. I kind of thought that because I didn't include the stuff from that period of time, the Marvel
Heroes Reborn
period of time, but there's like one Herald of Galactus that's different. Her name is Plasma, so I put her in there. But everybody else was just kind of, they looked exactly the same as they normally would. Like Namor looked pretty much, he had a different costume, but pretty much the same. And so yeah, I went through everything. I started ordering it. I put Galactus in the center, so he's split in half. That's the break for the 2 covers. So he's on one side, and on the other half of him is on the other side, and it's 711 characters. So wow. I did do the regular Fantastic Four characters twice. I wanted to have what they originally appeared as, and then I wanted to have their current, whatever the current costumes are. So I did not know that Reed Richards had as many siblings as he does. He has not only does he have like a cyborg brother who's like a cowboy, but he's got Huntara was also his sister, and they just came up with a new sister too. Like, so, you throw in all those characters, and it was a really fun cover to do.
How long did it take you? Okay, let's just take the research that you just talked about out of it. So you have that many characters. How long did it take you to pencil it and first of all, lay it out, right? Because
Yeah.
that had to be very time consuming. Then you penciled it, then you inked it. Who colored it?
Rochelle Rosenberg did it. Amazing
Okay.
job. She's a fitness weightlifter in the Midwest.
Wow.
And she
Did you
did an
have to
incredible
give
job.
her like some sort of key so that she knew
Yes.
who the characters were and
Yeah.
like to know how
So
to color them? I mean,
it took me 3.5 days to do the initial research. So I went through all 700 issues of the Fantastic Four, or I guess at that point it was like 697 or whatever it was. And I looked at everything. I wanted to make sure that I, as much stuff as I could. I took screenshots of different characters and things, and I built a Google Drive that I shared with Rochelle. And that was basically the way I handled it. I was like, look, there's a lot of characters in here that this is what they look like, and this is what they, would normally look like, and this is what they look like in their first appearance. And, I would kind of choose one or the other. Like I'd kind of lean on whatever they looked like in their first appearance. But although with the exception of Galactus, because he doesn't really have any pants on in the first like 2 pages or 2 issues that he's in, but I tried to make it so that everybody had what they looked like at the time. And then it was really interesting to see how the designs shifted too. Like there's a specific design sense that people in the 90s were employing that people don't do now in the aughts and the 20s, and the same with the 60s. So like I just really enjoyed putting some characters right next to one another. Like I had Thundra right next to Hyperstorm, and then I had them next to, I forget, a new character named Space Boy. So like I had all 3 of those jammed together. That I just felt like it was really fun to like put like different decades next to one another. It was never ever going to happen again. That nobody ever watched. They'll use Hyperstorm all as the next major villain, but like they aren't going to use them anytime soon. And I just thought it was just really fun to like put everybody sort of together. It took me about a month from the beginning to the end.
wow.
It took me about, I was inking and penciling some stuff at the same time. So like, if I was super happy with, the way I drew Blastar, and I knew that nothing was going to be in front of him, then I would ink in that character. And it helps too to be able to have like the cover that's finished. When I was building in all the other characters, like I had the placement where the major characters would be. I knew where I wanted Black Bolt, but I didn't really know exactly who was going to be 100% behind Black Bolt. I even shifted it a little bit in the middle. I wanted to have the Miracle Man, or not the Miracle Man, Molecule Man. I wanted to have Molecule Man a little bit bigger than he was in the initial rough that I did. And I put him next to I think the Beyonder, just because I associate those 2 characters together.
Oh yeah,
and
sure.
I think I put him, the Adam Warlock character, up front a little bit more. So
it is an absolutely amazing cover. I mean, so it's coming out in 2 parts, you said. So right, it comes out with Fantastic Four 700, which probably just came out a couple weeks ago, and then Fantastic Four 701 is the other part of the cover, which I think comes out this week. So I highly recommend everybody listening, you got to check out this cover. Rush to your local comic store and just demand it, because it's history making, and it has to be a new record, right?
It is, yeah. I have to kind of clear it with the Guinness people, but I have to write them back. Oh yeah.
Wow, it's so cool.
Yeah, because it's over 300, and I think the first cover is 347, the second one is 360 or 361 or something like that. So it all averages out to more 362, or I forget what it is. But anyway, like yeah, it's over 313. So, and together it's 711 or something like that. So it was a blast. I really had a lot of fun doing that. I really want to do the Spider-Man 1000. It took me a month, so but that might take a little longer than a month. But
All right. So we do have a few questions from our patrons, if you don't mind answering.
All right. Well, Grant Baugh asks, what are some of the biggest misconceptions or misunderstandings people seem to have in regards to the art of inking?
Oh, inking. Well, it depends on the inker, honestly. Like, you're essentially the final editor on the book, like on the artwork at least. So like, you're the person that puts everything, and then you're making the final line. So you're essentially deciding what's going to be seen in the end, for better or for worse. So you really want to try and put your best foot forward and do the best job that you can. Sometimes you get a penciler that's really tight. Sometimes you get a pencil that's really loose. When I worked over John Buscema, he was really loose. And you want to just make sure that you put in the final line without like making the artwork worse.
There you go.
Want to improve it if you can.
All right. Mark Delmier, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Delmier asks, does the person who does the pencils or breakdowns ever give direction to your inking, or do they let your style be as it is? And I ask because art can look very different from one inker to the next.
It can. I think it's just that most people have it's like personalities. Everybody has a different personality. So in inking, there are different personalities, obviously. You get people who are really, really detail oriented, and folks who just they're more emotion based, like when you meet them even in life. Some people are much more emotional than others, and you get the same sort of thing from inking. It's an art that's it's almost invisible, but it's not, because like you say, there's a guy like, for every Klaus Janson, there's a guy that like a Jesse Delperdang, who would like stay very, very closely to the pencils. So you get a whole bunch of different people that do different things. It's very much like just different personalities.
Well, Matthew Glover asks, technology has changed the way comic art is created, with much of it now being digitally created. How has technology changed your approach? And are you worried about artificial intelligence technology's effect on comic art?
Well, I am still a dinosaur as far as using 18th century tools, like ink pots and quills and brushes and things like that. So most of the finished product for me is on paper, but the work that I do in order to try and get the page to get to that place, I do a lot of it on Photoshop. So I'll do some sketches out off just off the top of my head from something that like is in the script. I'll read the script or I'll sit down and figure out what I'm going to draw, and then like I'll do a little doodle, and then I'll fiddle with it in Photoshop just to get the right kind of like design. Like I'll sit there and I'll plot it out so that you can tell what the story is going to be like in total. And then I kind of go in and try and figure out like what things I want to like accentuate in the drawing. Like I just did a page the other day where I had just a 9-panel grid, but then I thought that that's too boring. So I just made a huge diagonal splotch and then combined some things in the background. The design work I do in Photoshop a lot. So for me, that's what I use the computer tool as. As far as AI, I don't think that, I don't really have a lot of thoughts about it, to be honest. I know that it's a tool that people are using, but I haven't run across it as a tool that I'm using yet. It might be easy to sort of sit back and figure that like you could use it to do shortcuts in your own personal work. But I don't know, I haven't used it. So there's a lot of people that they run around like the world's about to explode anytime something new happens, and it never becomes the thing that they really are fearing. Sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better, but I just don't have enough information as to what is happening out there now as to sort of sit back and say, well, this is how it's going to change things for me. I have seen I have a friend that was did a search on how folds are and clothing, but it wasn't the best response from the AI. So I don't know. You're better off taking a look at a photo or taking a picture yourself, or sitting down and actually learning how the folds in a cape or a shirt or something like that work. Sometimes it's not that hard to like sit down and figure out what you're going to draw, what reference you need. So as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't really bother me yet. It might in 5 years, we might, but I don't really see something going on that I can make any value judgment about right now. So
I'm sure Skynet agrees with you.
yes, exactly.
All right. Last question from our patrons. Joshua Van Dyne asks, with Marvel not really using American Dream or any of the MC2 characters for a while, would you ever want to return to her at some capacity? And would you ever want to ink her stories again or pencil them again, given the opportunity?
Oh yeah, I would love to do those MC2 characters. I thought they were a blast. It's a never say never. You just never know where some character is going to pop up again that somebody's going to want you to draw. Like, I'd love another crack at Deadpool 2099, or any American Dream would be a lot of fun to draw. So, all those MC2 characters I had a lot of fun with, the Thunderstrike and all those things. Marvel has such a tremendous backlog of characters that they kind of cycle through every once in a while. If you can keep your eye open, sometimes they need to keep the copyright and trademark every 17 years. So you will notice that on an anniversary of something happening 17 years ago, there will be a new trade paperback or like that pops up from it, or a new mini series that has some of these characters. Like I know that some New Universe characters came back briefly, on the anniversary of the 17-year cycle. So you will spot things like that popping up again. But I had a blast doing all those characters. I really had a lot of fun. So I would love to do them again. Yeah.
So we like to play a little game, Scott. We've asked several of our guests this question, and the whole multiverse thing has really taken off, and a lot of folks are fascinated by that concept. So we'd like to know, like, if you had never gotten into the comics industry, perhaps in a different universe, what would you have become?
Bob, you totally left out the what if question. You didn't even mention it.
All right. What if?
What if?
The what if.
I love what if. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I before I got into comics, I was doing sales of video cassette tapes door to door. I was making a lot of money at it, like $1,000 a week when I was like 21 or something. So I was really psyched about the money, but the job itself was killing me, because the amount of rejection that you go through is just off the charts. Nobody's interested until suddenly they want to buy 15. It's a weird job. So, but I was doing that, and I had met a guy named Bob Sharon, who is a colorist.
Oh yeah, we've had Bob on the show. He's a great guy.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you know Bob then. Bob knew my uncle. My uncle's name was also Bob. So Bob knew Bob. And at some point, I had gotten in touch with Bob Sharon after college, just after I graduated. I was trying to find some way in. So I went to go visit him. And while I was there, he showed me the stuff that he was working on, and showed me some scripts and things like that. And then he said, well, what's your horoscope? And I said, well, I don't really know. I gave him my birth date and the birthplace and the birth time. And I went back. I was just doing more video cassette tapes door to door. And I got a panic call on my answering machine, just a panicked call, like where he'd called up and he said, you are never going to be happy unless you're an artist. I've done your chart, and you're going to be miserable in life if you're not an artist. So I took it at that. There's no other choice for me at this point. I would have just been miserable. So
That's a
That's
great
awesome.
story.
I'm gonna next time I see Bob a lot he does a lot of the shows. I'm gonna have to ask him about that, and then maybe ask him to do my horoscope at that same time.
He should, yeah, because the thing is I didn't take it as anything. I was just like, okay, like when he asked me for the information, but then, like I said, he called up in a panic, like he was like he's like desperate to get this information across to me that I had to be an artist, and also that I should move to Los Angeles, which was the furthest thing in my mind. I eventually did Los Angeles, so, but yeah, him saying that I wouldn't be happy unless I was an artist was really, it was confirmation.
Nice.
And it was something I wanted to do from when I was a kid, from when I was 7. So I was talking with Howard Chaykin about it, and there was just no other job. There was no other thing that was going to make either one of us happy. So.
And you found it. That's awesome. And so what's keeping you busy nowadays? Do you have any upcoming projects you can share with the listeners?
Yeah, so I have a trade coming out in July of a couple one shots that we did over at Image. Jerry Duggan and Brian Posehn and I. Brian's a comedian. Jerry's
talk about funny guys.
Absolutely, Brian's fantastic. What a great person too, great soul. And we did a series of one shots with a character named Scotch McTiernan. The first of which was the secret history of the war on weed. And we're binding those all up together in a trade that comes out July 25th. So I hope that some people pick that up. If they haven't seen the series already, it's pretty much all the way from the guy's very young all the way till his death, essentially. So you can follow his story in a nice trade. And then the last issue of Koblish comes out on June 14th, I think. And that one is a weird monster book. You'll probably enjoy that too. And then I'm working on a new fantasy series, an ongoing, that I'm hoping to get out from Image probably at the beginning of 2020. Well, what year is it now? 2024, it'll be next. So yeah, hopefully in the beginning of 2024, we'll have an ongoing. I'm going to try and bank as many issues as I possibly can to get it so that we have a pretty smooth rollout. So that's what I'm working on.
So tell us about, what was it, Kaiju?
Oh, Koblish. Yeah, Koblish is it's a kaiju monster. Essentially like it's like a, I don't really know how to describe the story. It's a very it's for adults. It's just kind of Jerry pitched it to me where he was like I guess he was looking at a Godzilla film, and the Godzilla film was going for a while, and I think he had at some point, and he was like, boy, I've been watching Godzilla rampage across the screen for like an hour and a half, and he hasn't had to go pee once. So like he was trying to think of like what that would mean as a story. So it's a whole bunch of pee and poop and sex jokes, essentially, but or spread over about 3 issues. But I had a gas doing it.
Who's publishing that?
That's coming out through Image, so
okay.
you can pick it up. There's some should be some issues floating around your local comic book store. KOKJU with a little umlaut over it. Yeah.
Nice.
So
that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are great writers.
Yeah,
it sounds like a fun book. Excellent. And what's your?
Well, that was it. Yeah.
If listeners want to reach out to you, or do you do commissions at all?
I do commissions, but based only really on what my schedule is. Right now, I'm a little tight, but you can get in touch with me on Instagram. I'm Scott Koblish on Instagram, and Twitter. I'm still sort of there, but Instagram's the best place to sort of hit me up, because then you can send me like a request message. Do you know what I mean? I can field it, no problem. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, listen, Scott, it was so much fun wrapping Cap with you. Thanks for taking us through some of the stories behind the stories on some of the work you've done, and your, no pun intended, illustrious career, right? I mean, you've the thousands of pages that you have worked on over the last 30 years has been amazing. So we appreciate you taking some time to talk with us.
Oh, of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Scott.
All right, Bob. Well, that was a fun conversation with Scott. Yeah, I learned some things. I always love the stories behind the stories, but it was great having him on. And I know he was kind of joking about time someone had him on to talk about the Taco Bell special. But there was a lot of things we wanted to talk about on that comic. So and of course the rest of his career too. So it was good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we joke about it. It's fun, but those comics serve a really important purpose, as we talked about. And
Agreed.
It's got to be exciting about being able to reach out to new readers and get them excited about characters and the Marvel universe. And so I think it's cool. I'm glad we got to learn a little bit more about how that sausage was made and how those things go down and his role in them. And I'm really, pleased as punch, obviously, to own a page out of that. Because
are you hungry?
Weird.
What's going on here? You're talking about sausage. You're talking about rolls. You're talking about punch. Like, what the hell?
It's time for my bedtime snack.
Apparently.
Yeah.
No, I agree. As somebody who used to own a comic book store, I made sure it was really important to appeal to the kids, in the store as well. I mean, most of my customers were in their 20s and up, right? But there was totally a section that I had devoted to all ages comics because I wanted there to be a place where the kids could feel comfortable and go into. And Scott mentioned Marvel Adventures, and that was a line of all ages comics that was coming out at the time. And I applaud Marvel for doing that because it was important. They recognized as well that it was important to grow the audience base. You can't just only appeal to guys our age because eventually we're going to die off. Right.
Yeah,
so,
right. Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, it was good to talk about that.
Yeah. A lot of interesting stuff I didn't know before about, inking and, so, I mean, that was interesting, and it was really fascinating to hear about how, his life might've turned out miserably. But thanks to Bob Sharon,
thanks to Bob Sharon,
it didn't. So
yeah. That's so funny. Next time I see Bob, I'm gonna have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
Now, Bob, next episode, we are going to go back to Castaway in Dimension Z. Now, this is something that we have been doing. It's an 8-part series, and we have been doing it the second Wednesday of every month. So if come back next episode, and we're going to be covering Castaway in Dimension Z Part 5. So that's Captain America Volume 7, Number 5, which came out in 2013, so 10 years ago. And it's a very cool story by Rick Remender and John Romita Jr. and introduces Cap's son, Ian, and Ian Rogers as Nomad. It's a really fun story. I've been enjoying it. We're halfway through. So if you've been keeping up on that, definitely come back next episode for Part 5.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to jumping back into that. We do this, every month, and just, boy, I look forward to it now because I'm really getting something new out of those issues every time we dive back in. Really
100%. I so appreciate this story. Here it is 10 years later. I think I appreciate it now more than ever.
They should do how like book clubs at church, where like a bunch of folks sit around, read a book together and discuss it. They should do this for comics. We should just have like a school circle, crisscross applesauce.
Oh, absolutely. Sign me up.
Yeah. I mean, I get insights from you that I hadn't picked up before. I'm sure you don't from me, but it's probably entertaining.
I'm a very smart guy.
Yeah. Well, that's what everyone tells me. I haven't believed them, but yeah, I mean, it seems to, well, maybe not, but anyway, I think that'd be a lot of fun, right? To have those sorts of sessions. But,
all right, Bob, I'm going to do a dad joke now. Ready?
All right, here we go.
All right, here we go.
All right, I can't wait.
I'm a smart fella. You're a fart smeller.
My dad tells a story about one of my nephews who
Uh,
was in Dunkin' Donuts with him and turned to him and rather loudly said, "I'm a fart smeller." And my dad was like, "What? You're a fart smeller?" He didn't know what the hell the kid was talking. He was like 12 or something at the time. So
that's funny. Oh, you teased something. You teased something before we just started talking to Scott. What was that, Bob?
yeah, you had an idea.
I have lots of ideas, Bob.
Yeah, well, I know, but some are better than others. But this was a really good one, and this was a top 10 list show, and we love doing those, and people really seem to really get into those and like to participate in seeding those top 10 lists. So, what's the idea, Rick?
I was thinking top 10 one and done villains.
Nice.
So these are villains that appeared in Captain America stories one time.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean one issue. It could have been a 4-issue, story.
Yeah.
But they only appeared in one story, never heard from again.
Yeah.
There's plenty of them over the course of the decades of Captain America comics, but we're gonna put together the top 10.
I think it's gonna be harder to build than many people think.
Well, we need help. We need help from our listeners. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put, we'll put a post in the Facebook group of who are some of your top favorite one and done villains and list them. And then, we'll take those into consideration. And we'll put together our own top 10 list.
Repeat those rules again, because you can only appear in one story arc.
One Captain America story arc.
So you got to do your research, folks, because if they pop up someplace else, they're off the list.
There's a really cool website that is worth going to, and it is the complete Marvel reading order, CMRO. So if you go to CMRO, which stands for the Complete Marvel Reading Order, .travis, TRAVIS, -starnes, STARNES.com. Go to that website. It's a really cool site. I've used this for a lot of research for our podcasts and stuff on the Facebook page. And then there's a place where you can go to. It's a character list, and it has every single Marvel character, and they have them in as far as major characters in alphabetical order, minor characters. They have obscure characters, first appearance characters, all in alphabetical order. And then if you click on them, like for instance, I'm on here, major characters. Second one, alphabetical order is Adam Warlock, right? I click on Adam Warlock and it has the complete reading order. So it starts with September of 1967, Fantastic Four 66. And then it goes on and on and on and on. So you have the complete, if you are interested in a character, you could and you want to see every comic story that they've ever been in, you can just go in here and it tells you the complete reading order. It's actually really cool.
I'm just telling people right now, don't be putting Doughboy on the list. I know you want to, but don't.
This is my shaking my head face.
People love the character. What can I say, Rick?
And when you say people, you mean you.
He's a fan favorite. That's what
when you say fan, you mean a fan. Right?
How could you not love the pudgy guy?
Oh, All right. Well, that's cool. So we'll look forward to that in the Facebook group. Let us know who you think should make the top 10 Captain America one and done villains. That'd be a lot of fun.
That will be fun. Yeah. I bet we get some crazy ones we forgot.
Totally. All right, Bob, as always, it has been fun wrapping Cap with you.
It has. I can't wait till next week.
All right. He's Bob Lucius. I'm Rick Verbanis, and you have been listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.